An article in the Intercept online, and this is reference to another article within the Intercept, and Glenn Greenwald, it's Greenwald. I think he co-founded this Intercept, the Intercept online news organization, I guess you can call it. They have different articles about different world issues, and so anyway, he was doing the anti-Muslim controversy, the anti-Muslim controversies of the last week and reimagined. I'm going to speak about that in another video. Actually following this video, but he at the end of that article he did, and this is Glenn Greenwald writing these articles. Various people write their articles, but I like the ones that Glenn Greenwald does, even though I probably I disagree with about 75% of his articles, but and he's Jewish and I'm Jewish, go figure, right? But anyway, but within that article that he was doing, the anti-Muslim controversies of the last week reimagined, he puts at the end of the article, he puts a click here, and what it is, it goes to what it's discussing is a Muslim a race as well? In other words, can you be a Muslim just simply by being born into a Arabic or even a non-Arabic Muslim family? Like when Jewish people are born into a Jewish family, or when a child is born into a Jewish family, he or she is automatically Jewish. I mean, that's just the way we are. Now, I realize a lot of people probably disagree with that, but that's the way things are. Okay, so but he's also saying, Glenn Greenwald is making the argument that Muslims that are born into or babies that are born into a Muslim family, he or she is automatically a Muslim. And I disagree with that, actually. I disagree, and I'll tell you why. For one thing, Islam, if you put it in historical perspective, Islam is based, probably about 90% of their doctrine, of their Quran, is actually based on the Old Testament. I mean, not only this particular issue, but headdresses and beheadings and all this stuff actually comes from the Old Testament. That's the way the people in the Old Testament dealt with transgressions against Judaism. So let's say, for instance, if you commit adultery, well, you died in the Old Testament. If you're a homosexual, you died. If you committed murder, you died. If you decided not to believe in God or Hashem, you died. Well, that's the same thing in the Islamic faith. The same penalties for homosexuality, adultery, not believing in Allah, death, automatic death. And so, especially in Saudi Arabia, which they actually continue on to this day, they actually have Sharia law in place that actually permits these acts of the death sentence be carried out against those that commit those particular acts. Now, of course, modern day Israel doesn't do that, so it's much more modernized, up to date. But if Israel decided to conduct its punishment for particular cases and based it completely on the Old Testament, Israel would be absolutely no different than Saudi Arabia. Now, that being said, not only is the punishments for certain acts done by either stoning you to death or beheading you, but it's also the way you dress, the way headdresses, your headdress or the veils or certain things as far as eating. You're not supposed to eat pork. Or ham, which is basically the same thing. Comes from a pig. You're not supposed to do that. Muslims don't do that. Even a lot of the food that the Arabic / Muslim culture was eating at the time of Muhammad's day is based a lot on Jewish meals. So what I'm saying, and even the idea of one God. So, like in Judaism, under Abraham, came up with this concept of the one God. Now, I'm not religious. I don't even believe in God. I don't know that'll blow you away, and you're gonna have to see my other video, Being Jewish, to understand that, because I don't want to get into all that. But nevertheless, Abraham came up with the idea of one God. Well, then Islam, 4,000, maybe 3,000 years later, Muhammad came up with the same idea of one God. Allah is one God. See, and what I'm saying is, Islam is based mostly on Judaism. Okay, now, and therefore, the idea that a Muslim or a person or a baby that is born into an Islamic family is automatically Muslim actually comes from Judaism. And so I've always considered Muslims wannabe Jews. I hate to tell you that, but it's true. They're wannabe Jews. They're not Jewish, but they want to be like Jewish people. And the irony of Muslims is that to this day they actually carry out what the Quran tells them to do, whereas Jewish people today don't carry out what the Old Testament dictates. And therefore, there's a conflict. And therefore, you're wondering why the Muslims are doing what they are doing with beheadings and all this stuff. And it's based upon their book. Whereas the Jewish people don't do that kind of stuff without a due process, and they just imprison you for life or whatever. They might put you to death, but it's through an extreme due process in Israel that you go through before that happens, because it's not based, Israel laws are not solely based on the Old Testament, and that's where the conflict is at. So in other words, Muslims kill Jews, like behead Jews, just because they're Jewish or because they're in their land, or they perceive that's all their land over there and all that other crap, because they're carrying out what the Quran is telling them to do. Whereas the Jews are not doing that, because they're not carrying out what the Old Testament tells them to do line for line. Now, on the other hand, if the Jewish people did exactly what the Old Testament told them to do, there would be probably no Muslims left in the Middle East, because we have a upper hand on it, because not only do we have the military might to do it, but we also we have such a long history of it that how to say that, we have such a long history of it that we're I hate to say it like this, but we're good at it. In a sense, that is. In the sense that we've been doing it for so long, or we were doing it for so long before the Muslims/Arabs were. So the irony of it all is that it appears that Muslims or the ones that, or the bad guys on the block, which they mostly are, but that's because they're carrying out the doctrine of the Quran, whereas the Jewish people have not, they don't behead anymore, they don't stone you to death for adultery or homosexuality, or if you don't believe in God, they don't kill you for that. So it's much different. And once again, this is where I take issue with Glenn Greenwald, is that, and he's Jewish, by the way, and I take issue with him because he's not putting it back into perspective again. Once again, this guy, I don't know what's wrong with him. He had some kind of serious animosity to not so much, well, I don't know if it's even to the Jewish people. Definitely to the state of Israel. He has a serious animosity toward the state of Israel. Now, I have my misgivings of the state of Israel, but ultimately I support the state of Israel. But I think he also almost has some animosity toward being Jewish even. He's got some serious self-discovery that he needs to go through. He has some serious self-analysis as a Jew to figure out why he has problems where he can't put things in perspective. So what I'm basically saying in this video is that according to the Muslims, if a baby is born into a Muslim family, be it Arabic or non-Arabic, but by choice, preferably, as far as the Muslims are concerned, preferably it's an Arabic family, because it actually says that in the Quran. If anyone, I actually have this huge book. I have the whole Quran. It's like this big. It's like 1,500 pages long. And about 10 years ago, I got it from the Center on American Islamic Relations, and they sent me this book for free, and it was just huge. They used to send them all out for free. Now it costs a little bit of money. I think it's for postage you have to pay. But it's a huge book. And I read it. And in the Quran, what it says, and this comes from this center, which is like the Muslim center. I mean, that's official center in America. And in the book it says that preferably they prefer to have the Quran understood in Arabic. They prefer, it actually says that in the Quran. Preferably, they would prefer to have Muslims read the Quran in Arabic. Okay? So, that's said anyway. So anyway, but nevertheless, a Muslim believes that if a person is born into a Muslim family, he or she automatically becomes Muslim. But that is taken solely yet, not just a little bit here and there, but solely from the Jewish doctrine of the Old Testament. So when Glenn Greenwald says that, well, the Muslims also look at it that they are also born as a Muslim, no, they ripped that off from the Jewish people. You understand? They took that from the Jewish people. And so, I mean, they can. I mean, if they want to look at it that, a person that's born into a Muslim family is Muslim, whoop-de-doo. I don't really give a fuck, tell the truth. But I'm just putting it in perspective and putting it within the historical, I guess in the historical perspective, that is where it came from. You understand? And it came from the Jews. Even Christian doctrine has a lot to do with, believe it or not, you might not agree with it, but a lot of it's based on the Old Testament. The Jewish people in the Old Testament pretty much set the standard for all the religions that followed thereafter. That is, especially Islam and Christianity. And so, as far as the Jewish people are concerned, yeah, when you're born, when a baby is born into a Jewish household, you're automatically Jewish. And on your 8th day, and this happened to me, on the 8th day, the rabbi clips your ass. In other words, they circumcise you. And that, what happens there is especially to religious Jews, it's a covenant automatic. It's an automatic covenant between that child and Hashem, or fulfilling the Abraham covenant by having yourself clipped, and that also automatically makes you, even reinforces the idea that you're Jewish when you're born. So when you're born, you're Jewish, but when you get clipped, that covenant is automatically fulfilled. Now, not that I buy into all that. Now, I know I'm Jewish because of the way I was raised, and the way I was raised, more or less, is no different than how a Jew was raised during the Old Testament. Basically the same way. And not only that, but I pretty much also, in my own life, personal life, I strategize and I think like a Jew. Now, a lot of people think, what the fuck? What do you mean you think like a Jew? Yeah, I think like a Jew, and I get that from my mother and and the little bit that I do from my father, because he had passed on when I was 2.5, and they got that from their parents and went on back. So, and then as far as being a race, yeah, I mean, when the Jewish people went into exile, we went to different countries, and like, for instance, like my parents were born in America, but my grandparents were born in Romania and Russia, and so they indoctrinated some of those types of cultures into their life as well, even though they're still Jewish. And that was pretty much pointed out to them that they were Jewish, because when the Russian Red Guards, around the turn of the century, about 1905, I mean, my grandfather could have very easily went into not the death, but the work camp, simply because he was Jewish, but he was smart enough to get himself out of that. And I go into that in my video called Being Jewish. So, anyway, the point is that Muslims definitely believe that a child born into a Muslim family is automatically Muslim. Okay? But that is based on Jewish doctrine, or on a Jewish way of life that existed thousands of years before Muhammad came along. That's for one thing. And the other thing is, a Jewish child or a Jewish baby on the 8th day gets circumcised, something that the Muslim does not go through. So between those two steps, or those two processes, reinforces the fact that the Jewish people are not only a religion or a race or a nationality or whatever have you. I always say we're just Jewish people. But it reinforces the idea that we're automatically Jewish when you're born into a Jewish household, preferably with a mother and father that are both Jewish. Now, there are some that will say that if the mother's not Jewish and the father is Jewish, that that child is not Jewish. And, like, for instance, perfect example, Adam Goldberg, he's an actor. I mean, I love his acting. I think he's great as an actor. He's funny as shit. I mean, he's just funny as hell, right? But his mother is non-Jewish, and his father's Jewish. And he was pretty much raised Jewish, actually. He knows Hebrew and stuff like that. And, but anyway, in the conservative and the Orthodox circles of Judaism, of the Jewish people, they would consider him a non-Jew. But in the Reformed or more liberal-minded Jews, they would consider him as Jewish as anybody else. And, when it first began in Judaism, it was really a very patriarch type of religion. It was mainly the male that was pretty much in charge of things. And as time went by, the idea of and it's actually in the Old Testament, I can't remember where at, but it's actually in the Old Testament that it changed to the fact that if the mother is Jewish, then you're automatically Jewish. It's actually I can't remember where that passage is, but it's actually in the Old Testament. And that came sometime later within the Old Testament. But in the beginning of the Old Testament, it was really a very patriarch kind of religion. I mean, Moses, Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, I mean, all the patriarchs. And then it changed over a period of time. But nevertheless, now, I'm a pretty open-minded Jewish person. So when I think of Adam Goldberg, like his father's Jewish and his father's Jewish and his mother's not Jewish, or is non-Jewish, I look at Adam Goldberg as somewhat of a Jew. I would prefer him to be old Jewish. I sort of think of him as a Jew, but then I have my hesitation on that. Even though I'm open-minded, I would prefer to have him as completely Jewish. Like what's his name? Ben Stiller, another perfect example. Ben Stiller's, I think, mother is non-Jewish and his father's Jewish. And same thing with like Adam Goldberg. I sort of see him as Jewish, but I don't. And I'm not even Orthodox or conservative. I would prefer the Jew to have both the mother and the father Jewish. I would just feel better that I would feel more at ease or more safe there. That's how I would guess safety would be the best. In other words, like would never happen, but let's say if I was in Israel and I was on the fighting line there, they're having a war, okay, against, I don't know, Arabs or whatever. And, we're both in the trenches and we got our guns and we're looking out, And I have Adam Goldberg to my right and I have Ben Stiller to my left, and we're both fighting the war. I would have a little problem with that because they're not Jewish. I mean, they are, but they aren't. I know a lot of non-Jews completely don't understand a fucking word I just said. But, even though they're Jewish, they're not really Jewish. And that's the problem that I have with that. Now, on the other hand, if it was someone like Howard Stern to my right, and well, that would be a very, very funny that would be a very funny trench that we would be in. But anyway, let's say if I had Howard Stern to my right and Don Rickles to my left. Why I brought that up was because I just saw this thing, Don Rickles and Howard Stern on David Letterman. Greatest. I actually have that in my favorites on YouTube. But anyway, I don't mean to make light of this. But anyway, so I have Howard Stern on my right. I have Don Rickles on my left. I would be extremely safe in that trench. I would be comfortable. I'll be like, let's get these motherfuckers. I would just, yeah. See, and that's like, I would be just fine in that trench with two Jews that both have parents that are Jews as well. So there is that, I don't know if you want to call it a mindset or whatever have you, but, or some people might say, well, it's just genetics, but there's something that is there where I feel very safe and very comfortable to be in a situation with a Don Rickles and a Howard Stern as opposed to a Ben Stiller or an Adam Goldberg. And that pretty much sums up what it is to be Jewish, I guess. I don't mean it to be funny, but any Jew will completely understand what I'm saying, regardless if you're open-minded or liberal or reformed or orthodox or conservative. A Jew would ultimately prefer it that way, to have a Howard Stern and a Don Rickles as opposed to an Adam Goldberg and a Ben Stiller. I mean, it's just reality as far as what it is being Jewish. And so, with that said, because this video is longer than I wanted it to be, to say to a Muslim, a Muslim believes that when a child is born into a Muslim family, regardless if it's Arabic or non-Arabic, they're automatically Muslim. But that is solely based upon Jewish doctrine that existed thousands of years before. And then they took, the Muslims or the Arabs/Muslims took that idea and ran with it, so to speak. And then they lived by it thereafter. So, once again, I disagree with Glenn Greenwald. As far as I'm concerned, a Muslim being born into, or a baby being born into an Islamic family, what is a choice? Okay? I know people, what the fuck? Yeah, is a choice. Whereas a baby born into a Jewish family that both have a Jewish mother and a Jewish father is automatically Jewish. And I know a lot of people are like, what the fuck? And it's true, because that whole Islamic doctrine is based on Jewish doctrine. It's solely 100%, 101% based on Jewish doctrine. And Muhammad, in his time, had a choice to say, well, do I want to put this in my religion, or don't I want to put this in my religion? I could put this in my religion, or maybe I could not put this in my religion. I don't know. Might sound a lot better if I put it in my religion. I think I'm going to put it in my religion. And that's what Muhammad did. He had a choice to put that in his religion or not. As the Jewish people, that was a period of time there between the matriarchs to the patriarchs But from the very get-go with Abraham, especially with the covenant on the 8th day, that was automatic Jew. You're automatically a Jewish person. See, and that's the essence of Judaism. That's the difference. And this is what Glenn Greenwald, once again, he does not put things in perspective, because he has some kind of an animosity towards, and I want to say something real quick. It doesn't even have to be the 8th day. Okay, the 8th day is mainly this whole covenant thing, but it's just the idea that you're born into a Jewish family. And now, a lot of people say Abraham was not the first Jew. Actually, he was the father of the Jews. So, and I'm not even religious, go figure. But I still look at Abraham as the father of the Jews. Now, as far as Moses, now, out of all the historic figures of the Old Testament, the one I admire the most, actually, is Moses, because he was the lawgiver. To me, he was the one that was like, he was the coolest one out of them all. In my book, I think Moses was great. I mean, I don't get into all the parting of the Red Sea and all this other bullshit, okay? But as far as the law itself is concerned, commandments and all this stuff, even though most of the commandments, especially out of the 10 Commandments, I keep to a degree, stuff like that. I don't believe God and all that shit, but still, I pretty much adhere to things in the 10 Commandments, because American law is based on the 10 Commandments for the most part, to a large degree. So, but nevertheless, I still admire Moses because he was a lawgiver, and I like law. So I that's the way I think, and so he's the one I really, really, truly admire out of the Old Testament, as far as great people that are in the Old Testament, or great historic figures that are in the Old Testament. But nevertheless, Abraham was the father of the Jews. He's the father of the Jews. Not a lot of people say, yeah, right. Right. Because probably most of the people that watch my videos are non-Jewish. I don't know, I might have some Jews maybe watch, but probably for the most part they're all non-Jewish people, and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, you can never get this unless you're Jewish. That's the problem. So I don't blame you if you don't get it, or if you're like distrustful of me on this issue, or you have some even animosity toward me for saying what I'm saying. I completely understand, because you're not Jewish, so I certainly can understand. But nevertheless, Abraham was the father of the Jews. You understand? So through a long period of time, the Jewish people, prospered therefrom from Abraham. But nevertheless, because Abraham was the father of the Jews, automatically, regardless if it's the 8th day or not, once you're born, you're Jewish, period. And that's the difference between the Jewish people and the Islamic faith, or the Muslims, or Muslims, or whatever we want to call them. Muhammad had a choice to put that in his religion or not put that in his religion. He will, he may not, whatever, but he wound up putting it in his religion. As Abraham, being as he was the first Jew, automatic, boom, everything after that was Jewish, whether you like it or not. And that's just the way it is. And I don't know where even I know I'm Jewish. So that's a funny thing. That's the funny thing. When you know you're Jewish. And I'll go you one better. I don't practice religion. I don't believe in God or Hashem. Yet I know I'm Jewish. And I know non-Jews will never understand what the fuck I just said there. But I know I'm Jewish. And I know I'll go even one step more. I don't practice religion. I don't believe in Hashem or one God or God. And yet, I am as Jewish. I am as Jewish as Abraham. How do you like them fucking apples? How do you like them fucking apples? I'm as Jewish as Abraham. I am as Jewish as Moses. I'm as Jewish as Howard Stern and Don Rickles. Absolutely no difference. Just as Jewish. And a lot of actually old non-Jews will not get that at all. That went just right over your head. You were stunned when I said that. That I'm no, even though I don't believe in God, and I don't practice religion, I'm still as Jewish as Abraham, the father of the Jews. And I know that just like you're stunned by that. I know that you didn't even hear what I said. They're just completely in shock on that. To a Jewish person will understand that. But to a non-Jew, you're completely baffled. And it's understandable. Why? Well, because you're not Jewish. You don't understand because you don't think and you don't understand as a Jew. And it's understood. I understand that completely. I understand that completely. And I have no problem with that. But anyway, with that said, because I wanted to give the YouTube audience some understanding of what it is to be Jewish. So when I take the position to say that a baby born into an Islamic family does have a choice, as opposed to when a baby born into a Jewish family does not have a choice. It's automatic. It's an automatic birthright. As I always say this, I'm going to put this as the caption. Jewish by birthright, atheist by choice. And that's the way I always say how I describe myself. Actually, let me write that down so I don't forget. And that's how I look at things. And it's not even, it's funny, people say, yeah, well, that's what you believe. No, it's not even belief. It's something I know. I know that. It's something that, I'll even go this one step further. I'll say if it's hard to explain this, but if that was not in my head, Jewish by birthright, atheist by choice. Right? In other words, if I was not Jewish by birthright, I might as well be dead. Really, and that sounds crazy, but it's true. That where it's at in my head, I have no fucking clue. But it's there. And either it comes from genetics, I don't know. I have no idea. That's very abstract. I have no facts on that. But so it's hypothetical. But nevertheless, it either comes from that, or it comes from the way I was raised, with my mother, mainly my mother, and a little bit of my father, and then my grandparents that were in my life. So, and then the little bit of Jewish community that I had around me. Our first neighborhood was mainly Jewish, and then we sort of jumped around a little bit here and there. Then being around my family, my cousins and my uncles and my aunts, they were very Jewish. And then, just being raised with just Jewish food alone. Passover, Yom Kippur, all that stuff. So, where it comes from as to how I know that I'm Jewish could be a lot of different reasons as to what makes that the way it is. But nevertheless, I didn't have a choice in that. Whereas Muhammad, in the beginning of Islam, had a choice. Do I want to have that in my religion? Don't I want to have that in my religion? You understand? I don't. You either get that or you don't. Apparently, Glenn Greenwald didn't think it through enough to get it or not. He might get it if he saw this video now, but I'm sure he's not going to be watching my video anytime soon. So that's pretty much it. I didn't want to have this video go on too long, but that's it. So yeah, a Jewish person, or let's say a baby born into a Jewish household, is automatically Jewish. Period. You like it or not, well, that's your problem. And a baby born into an Islamic family is not automatically a Muslim. Period. Even though they might think that. They could think that all they like. But no, because in the very beginning, when Muhammad was making his religion, he would say, take this, I'm going to take this from the Christians, I'm going to take this from the Jews, I'm going to take this from this, and I'm going to take this from that. And that Quran is, I would say, 90% based upon the Old Testament, and a little bit even based upon the New Testament. And he just picked and grabbed and put whatever he wanted in that Quran, and kaboom, he had Islam. That was by choice. And that's the difference. Anyway, I let go of this long video. Guys, have a good one.